welcome to NCBI Labs. So what's coming up this week on NCBI Labs live event number 29? Well, as usual, we have plenty to talk about. This week, we're going to be focusing a little bit on online shopping and how to stay safe online. Now, during the pandemic, much of how we do things has moved online, and people have been learning about, talking about maybe working online, getting education online, all of these different things that are a change or a difference to how they would have done things before. But in the case of online shopping, it's really just been maybe an escalation of how people were already buying what they needed, whether it's the weekly grocery shopping or shopping for DIY tools or electronics, even medicines. People use the internet to pick up just about everything. But what do you need to know about shopping online? How useful is it for somebody with sight loss? Are there any dangers to it? Well, today we're going to be talking to NCBI Labs technology trainer Dereck Carolan, as well as IBM Techline specialist Martin O'Sullivan, to answer some of those questions. A little bit later on, we're going to also have our regular quick tips section as well. And from this week on, we're going to do a little bit of almost like a training session each week. So if you have a smartphone, whether it's Apple or Android, just have it to hand when we're going through the quick tips section. We're going to be going particularly over the voiceover or talkback gestures. And we're going to start with some of the more basic ones this week. Each week we'll give you a couple of additional ones for you to practice in your own time as well, so that you'll be able to build up a good knowledge of those features. So we'll be doing that from today with our quick tips section. And of course, we're going to have our tech help section later on as well, where we answer some of your issues live on the show here. So all of that is to come a little bit later on. But first of all, this week on our Meet the Team section, it's the turn of one of our own live events team to be in the hot seat. So welcome back to the show, Sean.
Hi, Jude. How are you?
You usually don't get a welcome. We usually just take you for granted, but you actually get a welcome this week when you're being interviewed. So you're particularly welcome this week, Sean.
I'm normally down in the dungeon running the videos.
That's it, yeah. Now, first off, Sean, I have to just check something. Is it true? There's been maybe rumors, and I kind of tend to believe them myself. Is it true that for the past 3 years, you've been voted into Dundalk's top 5 most recognized celebrities?
I think that's true. I'm gradually getting into the top 3, but it's tough.
That's the ambition.
It's the 4 cores that are keeping me out of the top 3.
That's it, yeah. So you come in at number 5 every year, is that it?
Every year.
Well, there's actually a slight element of truth in this, in that most of you might recognize Sean's voice even from the tech support line, because Sean would be well known on the tech support line. But maybe, Sean, you can just give us a little bit of an idea of how long you've been with NCBI and where you're based and things like that.
I've been with NCBI over 5 years now. Based in Drumcondra currently in head office, but I started off with NCBI by volunteering for technical training. I started off helping Miriam, and Miriam gave me guidance on how to use JAWS and that at the time. And then after that, there a position opened up in actually clerical in the Dundalk office right next to me, so I took that position up, and then I've been sort of moving in out of different roles in NCBI ever since.
Brilliant, very good. And was that always your background in tech support and things like that?
Yeah, I did software development in college, and I always sort of worked something to do with computers. If I wasn't breaking them at home, I was fixing them somewhere else. Yeah. But yeah, no, I've always worked, even in jobs where it was just things like I worked in sales. I've worked in every kind of possible thing you can imagine, but you're always doing something on a computer or databases or, Microsoft products. So over the years, you become fairly adept at using them.
It must be something you've always enjoyed then, in that case, to be kind of dipping in and out of different aspects of IT.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like as a child, if I'd break things in the house, and I'd try and break them less before my parents got home. So that's kind of where I picked that stuff up from.
You try and break them less. That's a noble ambition, that is.
Yeah. Well, it's not as broken as it was when I first started. So.
And did that ever work? That excuse?
No. I don't recommend you use that excuse.
Giving people ideas here. So tell us, what does your role at NCBI involve at the moment? What has it involved over the last couple of years, maybe?
Well, I was after like clerical and that there, and clerical's a great place to work in NCBI because you do pick up lots of how NCBI works and all the services, and like it's vast, the services that we have. So it was a good starting ground of picking up, what we do and what we can do. And then I moved into training and support, and I've been doing training and support for maybe the last 2.5 years, maybe with NCBI, and now I'm moving into kind of like projects and website testing and app testing and a whole host of different things. So it's always interesting at NCBI, which is great.
And have you always kind of enjoyed that aspect of it? It must be challenging as well. I think we had this kind of same conversation a little bit with Colin last week. The idea of actually giving tech support over the phone sometimes can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's like a mixture of like sort of two thoughts, because every day is different. Like there's no two people coming to the same problem, but then through experience with people with slightly similar problems, like you can kind of get an idea how to solve it quicker, or you kind of get to the solution quicker because you've had experience. But in saying that, like I said there's no 2 days that are the same when you're doing support or training, because everyone's needs are different. Everyone has a different computer setup, different version of software, and if you're into it, it's always interesting. There's no day that you went, I've done that before. It's always different.
I think one of Colin's recommendations last week, I'm not sure if he thought it was a recommendation at the time, of course, but he said something along the lines of, I think he worked in IT support in the Norwegian language, and he didn't speak Norwegian, and apparently he felt that helped him. I don't know. There's a tip for you, Sean. You can go and work in a foreign country, a place that you don't speak the language.
If NCBI want to send me over to Sweden or Norway for a few months, I'll be quite happy with that.
For your professional development.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, is there anything specific? You mentioned there that your role has kind of changed a bit in terms of looking at different projects at the moment. Anything particular you're working on at the moment?
Well, we're currently working on a new website for NCBI, and we want to make sure that that's fully accessible, works well for every type of person that's using it, sighted, non-sighted, and different software. So it is a big undertaking, but it's shaping up very nicely, and I think people will be excited with the new features we have on the website. And I know like Kieran was on the past and Alan on the past, and talking about the smart hub that'll be coming in the next year or so. So I'll be helping Alan and Kieran out with that also, and I'll be doing a lot of app testing. I'll be doing a lot of testing for the HSE currently. Like they might have a website or a portal, and they'll send it to us, and we go through it for accessibility and give them notes back on it, and they can correct it from there, which is very useful for them to get their website audited in terms of accessibility, and then for us to know that there's going to be more websites out there that are accessible.
Brilliant. Yeah, very good. And a couple of those projects as well, we'll be sure to keep everyone updated on as they develop through this year. The ones that are related particularly to NCBI initiatives will certainly update people. Yeah, excellent. So thanks very much for coming on the show, getting interviewed, Sean. Great to have you on the show. So, go on.
I'll try and make the top 3 for the next time I'm on the show in Dundalk.
I was going to say there's Sean Doran. He's one of Dundalk's most famous sons, gunning for top spot. So watch out, the cores. So that's the warning coming from Sean Dunn. Brave talk there from Sean Doran. So thanks very much for coming onto the show today, Sean, and we'll no doubt be hearing from you later on in the show anyway, in bits and pieces as well.
Thanks, Jude.
Very good. Good stuff. So that was a nice start to the show this week. So before we go on, just to mention that if you have any questions, of course, as usual, on any of the things that we're going to be talking about today, but just to make Sean's life more uncomfortable as well, if you want to ask Sean anything, feel free to do that as well. You can send in an email at labs@ncbi.ie, or you can just use the the panel on the right-hand side of Teams if you're connecting through Microsoft Teams as well. Very good. So let's move on to our main topic today. As we said, we're talking about online shopping and how to stay safe online. And for the first part of our discussion today, we're glad to welcome back Dereck Carolan, part of our labs team here at NCBI, to give us a bit of an overview of online shopping. So welcome back, Dereck. Good to have you on the show again.
Hi Jude, how are things? Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. So maybe to get straight into it, Dereck, to start off with, maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about why shopping online can be particularly useful or is of particular interest maybe to somebody with sight loss.
Yeah, I suppose, look, shopping online is a convenience for us all, okay? And it's just the idea of being able to go online, order items and get them delivered directly to your door, okay? So this is a big plus across the board because it means that, you know, you don't have to leave the house, you know, you don't have to organize transport to get in and out of town to do some shopping. You don't have to haul stuff around town with you while you're waiting for a bus or waiting for a taxi to get home, you know. The fact that, you know, shopping online is open 24/7, you know, you're not time constraints, you know, so you can shop late at night or early in the morning, whatever time suits you at the weekend and the Sunday, you know. And like a lot of the websites now are starting to offer a lot of, you know, good descriptions about the items that they have online, you know. So so it's a way of kind of being able to do it yourself independently, which is a big plus. Last week I was chatting to one or two of my groups after you had asked me to come on, and we just kind of briefly, I threw out the question, like, what would people buy online? And I think you mentioned a few of them earlier on there in your introduction, but like weekly groceries was a big thing, you know. Others mentioned clothes and then electronic goods. And then kind of the conversation popped up that people like go online and they sign up for different like Netflix or Disney or one of those providers, you know. So it's an online transaction again where they're, you know, passing over account details to these companies, you know. They might look at utilities such as changing their ESB provider or their broadband provider, you know. Like I suppose before COVID, we were probably booking hotels and holidays and flights, so hopefully we'll get back to that again. And others mentioned like takeaways or online banking, okay? And another one that came up was pet food. So people like to purchase pet food, and it's a lot easier to get it delivered to your door than trying to carry it home, you know? So
yeah, actually, yeah, that actually just strikes me there, because that's one of the things. We've got cats, and it's one of those things where some of the best ways to do that, instead of having the big sacks of cat food in your trolley coming back from one of the supermarkets, to be able to get it delivered is actually really useful.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, even with the grocery shopping, like, you know, you're not hauling stuff around the town with you, like, you know, or the guys come and deliver to your door and bring it in, or, you know, and it's unpacked there, and all you need to do is put it away. Like it is definitely a great feature of it. But also the fact that you can go online, that you're not dependent on somebody else really. You know, if you can get online yourself, you can work away independently and purchase what you need, you know, which is quite good.
It's handy just to even hear some of those things categorized, because sometimes when you're talking about something that's as big as the internet and being able to shop online, it's nearly so vast that it's hard to narrow down in your mind what you might want to try. So it's kind of it's useful just to hear what some people are using it for. Is it generally worthwhile from a financial perspective? Is it actually a case of being able to find maybe better deals online, or do you end up maybe spending actually just as much when you factor in postage and packing and things like that?
I suppose really it depends on the individual, and it depends on what you're looking for. I suppose if you have some time and you can spend a bit of time, like when you're online, you can do great comparison. So it's very easy to compare a product in shop A with a product in shop B to see the cost of them, you know. So you kind of do price comparison quite easily, you know, around, as opposed to if you had to go into town, you might have to walk half a mile in this direction to get to the shop A to go in and look at the product, and then walk back the opposite way again, you know. So like you can do shop comparisons, you know, or price comparisons on products in shops quite easily, you know, if you put the time into it, okay. Also, I suppose when it comes to the stuff being delivered, okay, a lot of the websites and a lot of the companies will offer you free delivery if you spend X amount, okay.
Yes.
So once again, I suppose it's going back to the whole kind of idea of being kind of organized. So if you can kind of plan ahead where possible, and look, I fully appreciate, and I know myself, it's not the easiest to kind of plan ahead sometimes. You know, you get stuck for something, you might need to order online, but if you can plan ahead and be organized, definitely you can save on postage and delivery costs. Okay, and also a lot of the companies offer good deals. If you spend X amount, maybe over €60 or something like that, you will get free delivery, which is a big plus. I suppose what you need to probably watch out for, Jude, is sometimes, depending on the goods you're ordering, if it needs to be returned, you just need to kind of look into the terms and conditions in relation to items being returned. Some companies are very, very good, and if something needs to go back, they may offer free pickup to bring it back. Okay. Others might involve you having to repackage the stuff and bring it to a certain location, and it's picked up from there from free or brought back. Whereas others sometimes will charge you for returning the goods. So you just kind of need to keep aware of that. But generally, like I would find, and like from talking to different people as well, if you kind of do your homework, you should work out fairly okay,
Yeah, very good. I guess it's kind of like anything else in that if you've got a string of, let's say, you were somewhere where there was 100 shops, you could go into all of them, you'd find some are good on selling some things at a good price. Others are maybe have strengths in different areas in terms of their pricing points. But if you're able to compare them, you're able to get a good deal across the board. In a town, you're kind of restricted to however many shops are in that town. But I suppose that's the advantage of the internet as well, isn't it? You've got kind of this huge place to be able to actually compare providers, and that gives you quite a lot of scope for saving, I guess.
Exactly, and possibly sometimes it gives you too much scope because you have too much choice. But that's the good with the bad, as they say. But yeah, no, definitely it gives you get a good price comparison, across the board on a wide range of products. Yeah.
So I guess if that's the case, then is it pretty easy to pick up and just to learn how to shop online? If somebody has been a little bit maybe afraid of it before, is it fairly straightforward to do?
Yeah, it's one of these things I think that you possibly need to do it once or twice to kind of build up your confidence, in doing the process and working it out. From talking to the guys last week in the different groups again, the key thing that came back to me is that they kind of use sites that they're familiar with the whole time. Okay. Yeah. So these are websites that they would have gone into and probably spent a bit of time browsing around and getting familiar with the layout and where to find products and where the shopping cart is and how to add an item and that kind of stuff. So once you kind of, I suppose, break it down, and there's nothing worse, because I know one or two of the websites sometimes that I've been on before is once you add something to your shopping basket, a little countdown timer might start clicking off in relation to you might have 15 minutes to complete your transaction or whatever. And if that's the first time that you're on the site, it will put you under a little bit of pressure, and you're kind of trying to navigate around and get everything through before the 15 minutes are up, or you might have to restart again. But I suppose go back to your initial question, is it easy to pick it up? Yes, for some of the sites they're very, very straightforward. You just possibly, like I mentioned earlier on, doing your homework, you probably just need to do a bit of preparation the first couple of times, and once you get in on it, you'll find that a lot of the sites have similar flows to them, so that they're laid out quite similarly. The process is the same in most respects, So yeah, I'd say it's straightforward enough to pick it up, but it's a confidence thing as well, and you possibly need to do one or two transactions first of all to get up and running, and sometimes maybe a bit of assistance at the start, and like the labs team are always here to help. But it is. I would say it's straightforward enough with it, to get going. Yeah.
You mentioned there that there's maybe differences between different websites. Does it tend to be like a completely different experience on some websites, or is it a case of the general principles are kind of the same, but they might kind of look a bit different, or they might go through a few different steps? What's the...
Yeah, look, in general, the principle is the same. You're going onto a website. You're selecting products, you're going to put them into some sort of shopping cart, and then you're going to go and check out. So that's the general principle, and pay for it, okay? But I suppose it depends on what sites you're going on to. So say, for example, if I'm going on to a site and I want to buy an iPhone, for example, or an Android phone, I don't want to start that debate again, but if I want to buy a new phone, okay? And so I would go onto the website that's selling the phone, find the phone, and add it to the cart, okay? And carry out the transaction, okay? Say I was going to book a flight to China, okay? Or we're sending Sean off to Sweden, are we? So we're sending Sean off to Sweden.
So yeah.
Yeah, apparently so. So say I was to go online and do that, okay? When I'm doing that, the form will be a bit longer because it'd look for what airport I'm leaving, what airport am I going to arrive at, what are the dates I'm leaving at, when am I hoping to come home? Are we bringing Sean home? That's another argument. But so like there'll be a couple of extra little forms, applicable to when you fly out. That will be quite similar then to if you're booking a room in a hotel or something like that. Once again, is it look for dates and times you'd be arriving and how long you're staying and that kind of stuff, So there's a few little kind of tweaks like that, depending on what, once again, you're looking for. But in general, the principle is the same. You're trying to select your item, pick the item that you want, and then add it to the cart and then complete the transaction afterwards. Yeah.
So tell me then, with that kind of basic knowledge of how the whole process works, what would be some of the common issues with shopping online for somebody with sight loss?
Yeah, I suppose websites can be kind of set up in such a way that they're there to promote goods and promote products. Okay, so if you're with low vision or if you're using a screen reader, there may be a lot of clutter on the page. So when you open up the home page, there might be just different information being thrown at you left, right, and center about products, deals, and so on. Okay, so that's one of the issues. There can be a lot of clutter. All right. Another issue is you can be working away sometimes with your screen reader and you're moving through your web page, and then you come to a form field, and a form field is one of these boxes that you might type in some information into. So it might be labeled properly, so it just comes to unlabeled form field or unlabeled edit or something like that, and you're kind of going, well, what is that box, or what does it do, or so you can kind of get lost. Or you might be trying to add an item to your shopping list, okay, or you might be if you're doing your shopping list and you want to get 2 loaves of bread, you might have your loaf selected, but you might struggle to get to the option to put in 2 items as opposed to 1, so little things like that can be tricky to navigate, So clutter pages, unlabeled form fields, okay, so they're the boxes where we enter the information, such as keywords and so on. Unlabeled links or graphics, sometimes there might be a picture on the page, but it mightn't be described. There might be no alternative text on it to explain. So all text is the text that explains what the image is. So you don't have a clue, or the descriptions mightn't be that great about the product, It was just interesting. One of my groups last week, again, I was talking to somebody and they were kind of bringing up the point. They were looking at an item of clothing, a jacket or something, and basically they didn't get a full description of what the item was, so they weren't sure about it, so
So is there anything with some of those things that you mentioned there, is there something that, so let's say I'm online now, I come up against one of those problems, is there something that I should be doing, or is it just a case of I've just got to kind of accept in that position that maybe that website isn't going to be one that I can necessarily access at this point?
Well, I suppose just in and around the clutter, first of all, okay, the clutter, if you can kind of get used to the software that you're using, be it your JAWS or your NVDA screen reader or your Voiceover on your phone, or even your magnifying software, your Zoom text, okay, if you can get used to features and kind of try and kind of skip all the clutter. So what I mean by that is if you want to look for a certain product, there's usually a search box on the actual on the screen somewhere. So if you can do a find, okay, so sometimes the Control and F will give you the find function where you can type in what you're looking for, okay, and that allows you to bypass all that clutter, okay. Sometimes for some of those unlabeled form fields, if you kind of keep moving around by the process maybe of elimination, you'll figure out that's what they're looking for there and that, or maybe they're looking for the credit card number there, or the expiry date is the one that's unlabeled. Some of them might be labeled, some of them may not, okay? And unfortunately, I suppose some of them may not be labeled at all, so you might need to get some assistance from somebody just to say, well, that's what they're looking for here, this is what this box is, So that's kind of...
Yeah, I think that's really useful for people to know, because there's maybe strategies to try and improve it or to get the most out of it or to do as much as you can with it. But it's also good for people to know, I think, sometimes that actually it's not necessarily that they've done something wrong or that there's something that they should know how to do. It might just be that the website is not particularly well designed, and that's not something that they've done wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose websites are designed then and evolve as time goes on. So you might be on a website this week and you can work your way through it fine, and then next week the company might have some amazing offer, and they might have changed their website, the homepage on it, or put up some sort of offers, and that might have a knock-on effect to the way you would have done it the previous week. So it's a matter of kind of trying to navigate around it, like try and use your hotkeys as well sometimes, maybe to jump to headings on the page. So like the hotkeys are kind of built into JAWS, so you can either bring up a list of all the headings on a page if they're there, or a list of links, or also a list of form fields. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's around and on the page as well to move around. I suppose coming back to descriptions, sometimes like what I'd find is quite good myself is, if like sometimes I'd be looking at an item online and the description would be okay, but I'd start reading, there might be reviews about that item. So you could read the reviews, and that gives you maybe a better opinion of what the item is like based on people who've bought it previously. And other times I might just go and drop an email to the company, kind of go, I was looking at this, I'm not sure if the questions were answered. I have the following questions, and send them off an email. And sometimes they come back to me with those answers, which is quite good too, So
brilliant, yeah, brilliant. Well, that's been really helpful, Dereck. Appreciate you going through the basics of online shopping, what the process is like, and also particularly for somebody with sight loss, what some of the issues might be and possible solutions. We're going to move on to the online security section. Now we've got Martin O'Sullivan with us as well, but I'm not sure, Dereck, if you're able to hang on, but if you're not, thank you very much for joining us today on the show. That was really informative.
Well, thanks.
Very good. And just a reminder to everyone as well, that if you have any questions, please do put them in on the question and answer panel on Teams, or just send us an email at labs@ncbi.ie. But now we have Martin O'Sullivan with us. Martin is working as a tech line specialist for IBM. You're very welcome, Martin.
Hello there, how's it going?
So maybe to start with, Martin, can you tell us a little bit why security is such an important thing to talk about in an online environment?
Well, with security, what you're talking about is protecting someone from acting against your interests. So for example, if you're buying something on a shop, you want to buy something from that shop and not have them just take your money and not give you the thing. And you also want to make sure that someone isn't pretending to be the shop you think that you're on. For example, let's say someone was pretending to be Tesco's, and you thought you were going to get your groceries, and instead they just get your money and you get no groceries. And when you go to Tesco's go, well, you weren't on our website, we're on some website called TESSCOs or something like that. That's a common one that happens as well, as people pretend to be a different website. And there's a number of measures you can take to protect yourself against that sort of thing. The first thing would always be that if someone sends you a text, for example, the latest one going around is now because of Brexit, that you owe customs fees on a particular item that you're going to get. The best thing to do would be to contact that website themselves and ask them, say, oh, I've received this text to say that I owe custom fees. Can you confirm whether or not this is true? And most of the time they go, no, it's not true. That's just a spoof text. Some of the texts are actually being sent out in Irish now as well, which is interesting. So the first thing you've got to do is keep your head and go, when someone asks you for something in a hurry, well, it's not that urgent. Why is it a hurry? Why is it urgent? Why is there a hurry? Another thing you can do to protect yourself is, if you get spam email, just delete it. Don't bother replying to it. Some people say, oh, you should report it. There's not really much of a point anymore. You just delete it and move on, because it's your time.
Yes.
Another thing that I find is when you're doing, go ahead,
Martin.
When you're doing anything in security, it's always better to layer it. For example, if you're shopping on for example, let's say Vodafone, and you want to buy a phone, and I would always use Revolut. And the reason I use that is because I only put the money into Revolut that I want to spend on the shop. So for example, let's say the phone costs €50. I put €50 on my Revolut card, and then I use that card to buy the phone. So that if someone does manage to intercept the transaction, the maximum they can get is 50. They can't get into your bank account. They can't get anything else. So that's why I would always recommend people use kind of different things like Revolut and that sort of thing, because it adds a layer between you and
Yes. Yeah.
anyone potentially getting your details. So even if they get your details,
That's really useful.
can,
We might just get into a couple more specifics in just a minute. Just when people hear about security risks, so I'm just thinking that maybe somebody who's been a little bit reticent to use online shopping, whenever they hear things about security risks and things like that, they might be thinking that they're never going to go near the internet again, and then others might simply never think about it. Where is the balance with that? How worried should we be about online security? Because you mentioned there that there are some common things that are happening. Is the internet rife with it? Is it going to be a risk and a danger every time you go online?
well, it depends on where you're going. If you're going to Tesco's website and you have that bookmarked in your bookmarks file, you're always going to go pretty much to that website. It would be very hard for someone to get into a big website. Not impossible, but it would be very, very hard. And Tesco's themselves would have protection built in, because they would know that if someone got into their website and managed to steal, millions and millions of euro, they'd be on the hook for it, because their reputation is everything. So for a site that has a reputation to defend, you can be fairly sure that they have fairly robust security measures in place. But if you're on some, smaller website that doesn't really have that much of a reputation to defend, or if they do get hacked, just can't afford to pay you back, then you're in bigger trouble. Now that's not to say big websites don't get hacked, but they have more money to invest in security. A lot of the smaller websites will use secure platforms because they know they can't secure them themselves, so they'll use a platform, like Stripe or a few other payment processors who actually process the payment for them rather than processing it themselves. PayPal is another one.
Outsourcing it.
Yeah, exactly. Google Pay is another one. There's a good few of these outsourced ones now that people know, because they know that they can't constantly be on the ball in terms of all the security, they have to outsource it to someone else. Yeah.
Is there any simple ways of knowing that the website that you're on is a safe one?
Well, they always say, check for the padlock in the bar. For a visually impaired person, you have to check that it starts with HTTPS. That is the sign that it's secure. The S stands for secure. What happens there is the website has a layer of encryption between you and the website. So it means that when you send data to it, it can't be read. There is a team, I work for IBM, and there is a team who actually are paid to break into their websites.
Right. Yeah.
And they use all the tricks that would be used in the wild to try and break into a website. And they often can get in. A lot of times these things can have configurations on the website, but you've got to watch for example, if a website suddenly changes, or if a website suddenly has a whole pile of ads on it, that were never on it before, you'd have to be going, well, that's a bit suspicious. If a website, if you've heard about a data breach, for example, in America, Target was breached and they got 50 million names and credit card numbers. If you hear about a breach, you should always contact the company if you have had a relationship with them. For example, Target had social security numbers and they were breached. And they're a shop. It would be the equivalent of giving your PPS number to Dunn Stores. There's no reason for you to ever give that data to Dunn Stores. And that's another trick you have to use, is to limit the data that you're giving to a website. All they need is your phone number and email address. If they're asking for your PPS number, they're up to no good. We all remember what happened with Irish Water. If someone's asking for more information than they need to complete the transaction, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah. So sort of it's a nice kind of combination of sort of common sense, but also maybe just one or two little things to just check, like you mentioned, the HTTPS, just navigating to the address bar and just getting it to be read out if you're using a screen reader. Listen for the S, isn't it? So
yes, listen for the
that's S. Handy couple of tips there. We mentioned a couple of the risks already, but maybe just we could put a couple of terms to those risks, a couple of names to the risks that are there. So people will have heard about phishing, for example, Phishing, as opposed to starting with F. So what is phishing?
Well, phishing is when you're phishing for details. You're trying to get someone to give them, because hacking a computer is surprisingly hard. If you were listening to the news or watching movies, you think it's just a matter of a couple of keystrokes. You know, and sometimes that's all it is, but most of the time, even basic security can defeat most of the, as they call them, threat actors, people who want to do harm. But phishing is an easy way of getting someone to surrender their details for you. It's like you don't rob the house, you borrow the key to get in the door. And for example, in the real world, it would be people who hide their key under a flower pot. Well, you know, the thief can get in because the key's under the flower pot. They just open the door, get in, take the stuff. You know, they could even lock the door afterwards and put the key back under the flower pot. That has happened. And in cybersecurity terms, in phishing, they take something, you know, i.e. transfer money from your bank account. They may not even want your money. What they may want to do is use your account to transfer money to someone else, and then they leave your money alone because they don't want to get caught. And if you're not watching your transactions, or you're not careful, you might not notice that, you know, €1 million has come into your account, gone out of your account, and you still had the same account balance. That's happened before as well. That's called money muling. And
that's
if that happens, you can get in serious trouble for it.
Yeah. So just what form would this take when we're talking about phishing and people kind of almost robbing your details or trying to get you to give them your details? What form does that take for the end user, for the person who's at home sitting on their computer? How will they first become aware of something like that?
They'd get a message from their bank or from, you know, some business that they had dealings with, and it would say, oh, you know, there's been a hack on our website and we need you to confirm all your details. And when you go into the form, now, by the way, never click on those links because they can try and download stuff to your computer anyway, regardless of whether you fill in the form or not. But when you fill in the form, it'll ask you for everything. It'll ask you for your credit card number, your date of birth, all the security, your account, everything. It'll ask you for everything in the one form. And of course, once they have all that, they can then get into your account. So once again, if they're asking for too much data, it's like, well, the bank would already have this. And if they were hacked, why would they need you to reconfirm all that? You know, they'd already have all that. It would be that someone else had stolen it. And they wouldn't delete it from the bank. They would just take it. Because if you delete it from the bank, it becomes useless to you. For example, if you went into AIB and you stole all the credit card numbers and then you deleted all the credit card numbers off the AIB bank system, well, you would have made the data you stole immediately useless because the credit card numbers would no longer work. You're going to delete the data. So there's no reason a bank would ever ask you to reconfirm that data.
Yeah, so they're never going to have somehow lost your details that way. What if you get an email message or a text message or whatever form this message comes in, and you suspect that it is a phishing attempt? You mentioned earlier there's not really much point anymore in reporting those. Does that apply for all of these? Is that something even when you get like a text message through?
Oh, for your own sake, you can stick it in your spam folder, but I wouldn't contact the bank and say, oh my God, I got this phishing message, because they say, oh yeah, there's hundreds of them out there. But if the message asks you to do something, right, you can always go to your bank's website itself by typing it in manually into the address bar and looking up the contact number, or if you have the contact number for your bank, contacting the bank, and you know, you go to the bank and you ask them, you know, I've got this message, and the bank will nearly always say, yeah, that's a scam. But you can nearly always tell anyway, because the spelling is usually terrible on them, and the punctuation, the grammar is usually pretty awful. Not always, but usually. And also, there's very good, if you go to YouTube, there's a very good guy called Jim Browning who explains a lot of these scams in great detail. And what he does is he actually gets the scammers to ring him, and then he records them as they go through their scam. And he sets up he has a fake bank account set up for this. So they think they're getting all his money. And of course it's a fake bank account. And at the end of the call, you hear the scammer usually cursing and swearing because they realize this guy has been wasting their time for about an hour. And he does this for a living, catching scammers and things like that. And he puts the videos up on YouTube. So it is interesting to hear that, because the scams always follow the same script, and the script is quite simple. They want you to do something now, and they don't want you to talk to anyone about it. That's the key. They want to isolate you. They want you to not talk to anyone and make sure that you are in a panic. And when you're in the panic, you'll give them information that you otherwise wouldn't give them. That's the thing. There's always an urgency, and they always don't want you to talk to anyone, because of course if you talk to anyone, the other person would say that's a scam, just hang up the call. So normally when you get these calls, like someone rings up, oh, I'm from Microsoft and your computer is sending out viruses to the internet. Well, that's nonsense. And if that happens, the best thing to do is just go thank you and hang up. Just hang up, because there's no point in hanging up. And if you want to call someone, sometimes if you hang up and you pick up the phone too quickly, the person can still be on the line. So you dial in the number for your bank, and the other call hasn't terminated. So you have to be careful. You have to make sure that before you dial a number, you get a dial tone.
That's an interesting one as well. Yeah, very good.
Yes.
That's a good tip for people. Because I think as well, just as we're talking about this, the thing that you mentioned there about sometimes the most effective thing for the scammer is if they're able to get you into a bit of a panic, and then you don't think straight. You might know about some of these security risks, but you're still maybe vulnerable even though you know about it. So what if somebody has actually responded to one of these emails, or they've maybe taken one of those calls, and it's kind of, is it already too late? Is there anything they can do at that point?
Well, the only thing you can do at that point is to contact, let's say if it's a fake one from your bank, the only thing you can do is to contact your bank straight away and see if they can prevent the transaction from going any further, and they can start tracing it. In that situation where you have, you have contacted one of these people and you suddenly realize it's a scam, you do have to act very urgently. You have to contact your bank straight away and get them to stop everything, your cards, your everything. And it's a bit like, if you're in a car and, there's about to be an accident, well, you have to just slam on the brakes. You have to stop the car first, and then try and resolve the thing after that. You can't think, oh, well, maybe nothing will happen. You have to stop the car. You have to try and freeze everything, and prevent any further damage being caused. But damage could be done very, very quickly. So you're going to have to act, extremely fast. Get through to your bank, tell them that, your information has been stolen or whatever, and, explain, what happened, and ask them to freeze everything. Because that's the only way you can prevent, the problem becoming worse.
I guess sometimes people might be worried a little bit about the risk and kind of benefit scenario, or the balance of that, of okay, well, it's unlikely that was a scammer, and it's so inconvenient to go through all of this process and maybe even have to get my cards changed and things like that. Is there an element to that? Sometimes does that end up catching people out?
Yes, it can, because if you ring up the bank and they say we've no record of that call, you've been scammed. You have to assume then that you've been scammed. You have to check if there's no suspicious transactions on your account already. You got lucky, and you have to shut everything down. If there are suspicious transactions already on your account, then you have to stop any further taking place.
Yes.
And so you have to act quickly in that case. If you think it's a scam, even if it is a bit inconvenient, the bank can tell you, okay, there's, if the bank says, oh yeah, that was us, well then that's okay. If the
Yeah,
bank
yeah.
says, no, that wasn't us, then you have no choice, because at some stage you're going to be hit. It doesn't matter if it
Yeah.
takes a couple of days, a week, a month. You know, at some stage there is going to be funny transactions on your account.
Yes, yeah.
And you'll have to explain them.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah,
better
and there
off.
can be that delay sometimes as well, can't there? So you don't want to have too much of a false sense of security.
Exactly, yes.
Just mention something first. You talked about sometimes if you click on a link in an email and it might install software. Tell us a bit more about that. Is that what you call malware? Is that it?
Malware pretends is for any software which has malicious intent. So any software that says, you know, that wants to do something that you don't want to do it is malware. You know, you could argue that you know, some of the main social media websites have become malware with the way they're treating people's data. But the malware has malicious intent. It wants to do something to you. For example, it might want to log all your keystrokes, and the idea there would be to try and capture passwords, to try and capture data on you, and then once they capture that data, they want to use it nefariously. That's a slightly more sophisticated way than a phishing email, because they want to capture the data and they want to keep capturing it. So, for example, once they get onto your computer, they can continue to capture. So if you change your password, it doesn't matter. They've already got the new one you put in. So once that sort of stuff is on your computer, you have to get it removed with, you know, malware removal software. There's no way that you can leave that on your computer, because it will just keep taking stuff on you. You know, it's a bit like, you know, you have to stop the bleeding. You have to stop that, otherwise you just continuously lose your data.
Yeah. And is there kind of anything that's maybe a more proactive approach as well? So that's maybe if there is something that's come onto your computer, you can get it removed from a malware remover. How would you kind of protect yourself in the first place from malware?
Well, you can protect yourself with this. There's a tool now in Windows 10, Windows Defender, which is quite good. You can purchase additional antivirus software. I think that the Windows Defender is quite good. But you also have to remember that there is no tool that can protect you from yourself. In the 12th century, the London Tower was breached because the people inside London Tower let the attackers in, and the expression was, there is no fortress that can survive betrayal. So you cannot have a tool on your computer that will protect you from yourself. If you act in a way that is not in your best interest, there's no tool can save you from that. So I think the very first tool you have to use to protect yourself is to understand that if someone is asking you for something, you have to understand, why are they asking you for it? Why has this suddenly come out of the blue? Why is it urgent? And another thing I would stress is, when you are getting rid of an old computer, it is absolutely paramount that you wipe it. And I'll give you an example. I have found computers before, old computers in the bin and things like that, got them working again, and contacted the owner of the computer to tell them that I found your computer in the bin. Using tools that would actually break open their passwords and get into their computer. And once I had their password, you know, I was able to ring them up. And what would happen is, you would ring them up and they would say, oh, how'd you find my computer? Oh, there's a password on it. And then you would hear the wheels in their head turning. Oh, wait a minute, he has my phone number. He must have my password. And you'd be saying, well, you know, the password doesn't really provide that much protection on a Windows computer. Now, this is older Windows computers. Windows 10, it does provide a lot more protection. But even still, with an older computer, someone can guess the password. And if they have it for long enough and they have physical access to the computer, they will eventually guess that password. So the best thing to do is to make sure the computer is wiped before you dispose of it. And there's lots of companies who actually reuse and recycle computers. They're always looking for them. And you can get them, you know, they will wipe it for you. They will securely. They give you a certificate and things like that to show that the computer has been erased properly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just a way of protecting yourself. You know that this computer isn't going to come back in 10 years'
Yeah.
time to bite you.
Yeah.
Because
Very
you threw it
good.
away 10 years ago.
Yeah, very good.
Um,
That's a really useful tip as well. And we'll maybe get a couple of final tips off you in a second, Martin. I think we might have had just a question come in there. Daniel, did we get a question?
We did indeed. We had a question in from Miriam, and she posed the question: are banks liable for transactions done online with their credit card if you do not receive the goods or services?
It depends on how the transaction was conducted. For example, you can have a services not rendered on a credit card, and you can come back and look for the money back. But it takes a long time. You're talking about, maybe 6 to 8 weeks at least. And it's a pile of hassle to do because you have to prove that it wasn't delivered, and you have to go through all sorts of hoops. It is much better off to avoid such a thing. But if a company for some reason doesn't provide the service and you're left with no other choice, yes, then you can do it. But it does depend on the company, it depends on the country, and it depends on the terms and conditions of your card. And also it may depend on whether or not you have protection insurance.
Yeah. So you're probably going back to your earlier point there, Martin, about using the likes of Revolut or PayPal or something like that. Maybe does the layer in between to help you there?
Yes. Yeah, because the layer in between is always, when I'm ever doing anything, I always use the Revolut. And it's also a handy way. Let's say, for example, your Netflix comes out, in the middle of the month, but you get paid at the start of the month. You can always use your Revolut as a way of managing your finances as well, because, you just put the money onto that and you go, okay, the Netflix will take it, in the middle of the month when I have less money. And it means that you don't have to think about it and constantly be trying to calculate to make sure you don't spend too much money, because you can separate then out your spending money from your your standing order or your direct debit money or things like that. So it's useful as a function for that as well, but it's really useful in terms of security because you're layering. And that's the key thing with security, is to layer it, not to have something that's really, really strong and then no security behind it, but you to have all these layers. For example, Wi-Fi passwords. A lot of people will continue with the default Wi-Fi password for their internet service provider, and it depending on your internet service provider. For example, Aircom, all the Wi-Fi passwords are uppercase letters and numbers, and they're letters between 0 to 9. So you've got all the numbers, but the letters are between A to F, because they're what's known as hexadecimal values. Yeah. So that means that anyone who wants to hack an Aircom Wi-Fi can narrow down their search results. They know the password is going to be 10 digits long, and they know it's going to be numbers and letters, and the only letters they have to worry about are the letters between A and F. So they can narrow down the amount of time they need to attack it. Yeah. Now, most people don't have to worry too much about their Wi-Fi being attacked because the signal probably won't be strong enough outside their own house. But even still, it is best to make sure that your Wi-Fi password is reasonably secure and is not something that can be guessed. There are tools, there's a thing called Hashcat, which will guess passwords, and it can guess, 1 million passwords in about 20 seconds. So if you have something like that pointing at your Wi-Fi, eventually it's going to get in.
Goodness.
So that's why you use the longer the password you use, the better.
Yeah.
There was one.
For example, go ahead.
Yeah. There was one case there, just briefly going back to the credit cards and the websites, where somebody was purchasing. It would be a fairly expensive purchase, but it would be, a kind of a decent price. Now, not obviously too good to be true price, but when they went on to their website, to go to pay for it, next thing, oops, sorry, there's an issue with our payment system. Please phone such a number to complete, and they give you the order number. Next thing you phone up and you give them the credit card detail, and it comes back then, oh, sorry, actually, you might have got a text back from the bank. Did you get a text to your phone? You give them the text, and then it still gets declined, and they run it again. You get another text back, and what we found was that the excuse was the first time was overcharging you 800 sterling, let's say, and oh, sorry, that didn't go through in sterling, we'll try it in euro. But what they've actually done was hit your bank card twice, and yeah, the goods never arrive after that. So that's another one to watch out for. That's doing the rounds at the moment.
There's a lot in it, isn't there? There's a lot in this subject actually of online security. I just mentioned that we're just kind of running a little bit short on time at the moment, Martin. Could you give us just maybe the final couple of things that you would say to somebody if you're because we've talked about a number of different threats and there's loads more to this that we could talk about. But if you were to pick one or two sort of top tips for keeping yourself safe online, what would be your final word on it, if you like?
I would say layer your security, use Revolut, use different layers, and also use a password manager. And make your passwords, like all my passwords are 40 characters long, 40. The longer the better. The calculation I did on that would take a computer 5 billion years to guess your password. And in 5 billion years, I won't care. So, you have to make your passwords long, use a password manager, and have different passwords for everything. There's a very useful website called Have You Been Pwned? I'll email it on to you. It'll actually tell you if your email has ever been involved in a data breach. And don't worry, everyone's email has been involved in a data breach. Everyone's.
Wow.
And it'll tell you what was stolen in that data breach.
Wow.
So I would really recommend that website. It's called Have You Been Pwned?
We might be able to put that onto our newsletter or something similar to get it out to people as well. So yeah, that'll be really good.
I'll send you on the link to it because it's really, really useful. At least it tells you if you find your website or your email has been in a website that was breached, then you can change the password. And if your password is the same on another website, you have to change it there as well.
Yeah, very good.
The biggest tips I would be, keep your passwords very long. Use a password manager. Bookmark your favorite banking websites and things like that, and always go to the bookmark rather than to the link in the email. If someone is asking you to do something really urgently, just stop, because why are they asking to do it urgently? And finally, you always have to keep your head screwed on. You really do have to kind of keep one step ahead of them, because as I said, there's loads of them. There's loads of different, and they're variations on a theme. They'll be slightly different, but they're variations on a theme.
Very good. Well, it's been great to talk to you, Martin. Really good to get that insight into keeping yourself safe online, and really appreciate you coming onto the show today, Martin.
One more question just before Martin goes. How do you spell Revolut correctly for the listeners?
Revolut, R-E-V-O-L-U-T, I think it is. There's no E in it. It's a fairly big banking app. Now, as a visually impaired person, you're going to need a little bit of help setting it up, because it asks you to take a picture of yourself. And it asks you to put your face in a frame. So you will need some side of assistance. But apart from that, it is very useful, and the app is quite good. There are some accessibility issues with it, but mostly it's usable. I would use the Revolut because it's very, very handy.
Brilliant. Well, that's really good information. Thank you very much for that, Martin. And appreciate you coming on the show today. And of course, for anybody listening to that, if you've any follow-up questions to that as well, the team here at Ncbi Labs can either try and answer the questions ourselves. If there's anything else you have to put to Martin as well, we'll try and get in touch with Martin, and I'm sure that he'll be happy to answer as well. So really good, informative section there, and we'll continue on with the rest of the show. Just briefly, we'll cover our tech help this week. So this week, coming into the emails, we had a request about, I think this may be a follow-on from last week. We were talking about Wi-Fi and connection issues and things like that. How would somebody actually change their Wi-Fi connection, or just check even what network they're connected to or how they're connected? Is there a way they could do that? We'll put that to the panel.
Yeah, I suppose the easiest way to kind of get to that, Jude, would be Windows Ncbi always brings you to the notification area, and then you can right arrow along through the open notifications, which is like for me, it would be things like I'd have OneDrive, my laptop's battery, my volume, and I'd always jump straight to the chevron. But then in that right arrow list, you'll find your Wi-Fi, and you can enter a space bar on that. It'll bring up the list of different Wi-Fis, and that's handy if you ever need to just change. Like sometimes in the house, people might have a 2.4G or a 5G connection, or they might have an extender with a different name, and as they move to the house, they might want to maybe make sure that the laptop is automatically switched to the one they're closest to.
Yes, yeah,
I know,
that's really handy. Yeah,
I know in my house, I think I'm on the extender when I'm on upstairs, but I'm going, the internet's very slow. I just go down to my connections and go, I just actually want to go into this connection, and it'll automatically jump over now.
Yeah. That's really handy. I think there was another way, Daniel, you mentioned about getting onto Wi-Fi as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there's often about three different ways to do the one thing. And again, if you're on Windows 10, just hit the start button and type in Wi-Fi and hit enter. It'll bring you straight to the Wi-Fi settings. And if you press tab twice and hit enter, it'll bring up show available networks, and from there you can just arrow up and down and obviously select your network and enter in your password as well. So it's the exact same way as Sean says. It's just taking a different road to get to the one destination.
Yeah, very good. Very good. That's very handy. So that hopefully answers the question there about how to find out about your Wi-Fi or get into your Wi-Fi settings. So if you've got any other questions that you want answered live on the live event next week in our tech help section, do email them in to labs@ncbi.ie.
We just have a question in there, Drew. Yeah. We might pick up on this next week because I know we are caught on time, but is there a way to find out whether or not a website will charge customs, even though it might be a .ie website? So maybe that's one that we could come back to next week on our questions and answers.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So thanks for sending that question in. We might check up on that a little bit, and we'll try and make sure that's answered first thing next week as well. So appreciate you sending through that question. Now, just before we do our quick tips to finish up, there's still time to be entered into our competition to win a Blind Shell Classic mobile phone or a 4th generation Amazon Echo Dot. The closing date, though, is this Friday. So if you want to be in our competition, you just have to fill in our live event survey, which will be found in our weekly technology newsletter. So you can check that from last week, or there might even be included in this week. It might be a little bit late at that point, but you can find it in our technology newsletter anyway. And the winners will be announced on our show next week. So we're nearly sorted for today, but we just have our quick tips just briefly. We mentioned that we're going to do a couple of things in relation to our quick tips, that we're going to try and keep a bit of a theme going. So if you have your smartphone handy, or if you're wanting to find out a little bit more about VoiceOver or TalkBack, here's a couple of the basic tips. JP and Daniel, I think you're going to cover the TalkBack in a second, but JP first, maybe you can let us know about the iPhone equivalent.
Sure, first. Of course I will, Jude. So that's right. So over the next few shows, we thought it'd be a good idea to cover some of the different VoiceOver gestures that we can use on the iPhone and on the iPad. So over the next few weeks, what we'll be doing is covering different gestures you can use to, for example, switch between like running applications that you have on your iPhone or iPad and close them, turn on the screen curtain to increase your privacy, and then at a later stage how to use the rotor as well, which could be, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, a really handy way to adjust the settings like for your speech rate and your volume. But this week, though, what we're going to do is keep it simple and start off with going through a few more basic gestures that you can use for navigating screen content using VoiceOver. And there's two ways that we can do this. So first of all, with VoiceOver enabled, what we can do is we can move between different items on the screen, such as apps or menu items, by swiping right or left with one finger on the screen. So swiping right will move to the next item, while swiping left will move to the previous one. The the gesture itself, it's a bit like when you're trying to flick a bit of dust or hair off the screen. Actually, one good analogy that I heard there is that it's a bit like you're trying to gently flick away an eyelash from a child's face. So that was an interesting one. That's one way.
The other way is that we can navigate the screen content with VoiceOver using Explore by Touch. So this is where VoiceOver will, VoiceOver will read out everything that your finger passes over on the screen, and the last item that your finger touches will become the item which is focused on with VoiceOver. So if, for example, you have focused on an app on your home screen with VoiceOver using either the swiping method that I mentioned a moment ago, left or right, or Explore by Touch, we can then open up the app using a one-finger double tap, and that's anywhere on the screen. It doesn't have to be over the app or the menu item or whatever it is that it's focused on. Anywhere on the screen, double tap, and it'll open up. There's just one last tip for VoiceOver this week. It's also worth mentioning that we can practice these different VoiceOver gestures, which I mentioned a moment ago, by turning on what's called, and all VoiceOver gestures, by turning on what's called the gesture help. And we can do this by double tapping the screen with 4 fingers. So in gesture help, if, for example, we swipe to the right, we'll be given a description of what that gesture does. In that case, it'll be move to next item, swipe to the left, move to previous item, and so forth. So that's how it will work. Gesture help can also be turned off then with a 4-finger double tap on the screen. So that's definitely a good way we can practice and familiarize ourselves with the different VoiceOver gestures on the iPhone and on the iPad.
Very good. And how does that work for Android, Daniel? Are there similar sort of gestures on that?
Yeah, again, JP mentioned there, the simple gestures left to right, to move through the items on the screen, and additionally, where you navigate around with one finger, according as you come across the different icons or sections of text or whatever, it will call those out to you as well. So very, very similar. Now I haven't been able to find one for gesture help yet. I've been looking for one. That's not to say there's not one there, but I haven't come across that yet. Maybe Sean, do you know any?
They normally have the tutorial in the talkback settings that you can, even if you've already went through the tutorial, you can only go back and turn it on, and it's not quite the same, but it'll guide you through the main features of how to navigate.
Screen off. Ringer vibrate.
Or even hearing a demo.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's really useful just to have those basics. And obviously, if you're already a VoiceOver or a TalkBack user, some of these might sound very basic to you, but we'll be building on this week after week. We'll go through different gestures that will help you to build up your knowledge of how to use those features on the phone. So that's brilliant. Thanks, guys, for the quick tips this week. And we're nearly done for this week. So just a reminder before we finish that if you want a bit more of a hand with any of the subjects that we've spoken about today, you can get support from the Labs team from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday on 1850 92 30 60, or you can email labs@ncbi.ie, or you can contact us for our wider services on 1850 33 43 53, or email info@ncbi.ie. And if you'd like to make a donation to support our services, you can also visit donate.ncbi.ie. That's donate.ncbi.ie, or you can even sponsor one of our live events by emailing us here at Labs. Now, just finally, before we go, a reminder of what we'll be talking about in some of our future live events. Our next show will be next week. So I think the date is wrong just on the slide there. Our apologies. It's going to be next week, January 26th. We're going to be looking a bit at technology in sport, and actually we'll be doing that over the next few weeks. We'll be talking about technology in sport, whether it's while participating in sport or while watching sport. We're going to be looking at some really interesting technology. There's a really good one in a couple of weeks called Field of Vision, which is a really interesting way for spectators to be able to enjoy sport as well. We're also going to be looking at another piece in the weeks to come that we'd love to get your input into as well. Lessons from lockdown. Obviously, it's been a tough year the last year or so, but a lot of people have been using the time to maybe learn new skills or to find different ways to do things that they want to continue doing when restrictions lift. So what things will you continue doing? Well, let us know your thoughts as well, and we'll include that in our discussion. And hopefully in a few weeks' time as well, we're going to have an update on Soundscape. We mentioned that last week as well, so we'll look forward to that in the coming weeks. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on our live events as well as plenty more, you can subscribe to our newsletter as well on our website, or you can just email us at labs@ncbi.ie to join that as well. So all that's left for me to do today is to thank our panel again, to thank our guests again, and of course to everyone listening in as well. And we look forward to having you all back with us next week for another NCBI Labs live event.